when we speak about Mashiach, we often see Mashiach as a single individual. But the truth of the matter is Mashiach is many, many, many things. Firstly, it's the revelation of Hashem himself, the infinity of Hashem, which the infinity of Hashem has no limitation. Being that it's unlimited, it's a little bit like it speaks about in the very beginning of creation. We mentioned it, that Ruchai Shel Mashiach, the spirit of Mashiach, hovered over the water. Now, when it speaks about, it says mirachefes. Mirachefes, very interesting. It's very interesting how the Torah exists on multiple dimensions, and you just see the word, so it's like, okay, whatever, you think you got it, but it actually exists on very, very deep levels. Mirachefes comes from the word of pulsating. And the way Hashem functions is he functions in a pulsation. And it's very interesting, the very first light that Hashem made in the world, we know the first thing that Hashem made was light. Now, the fourth day is physical light. So this was not really light per se, even though perhaps also had a light per se. But interestingly, when my uncle, who's a very great scholar, came and he spoke here, he said that the light was pulsating in and out of existence. And of course, as we know, reality itself is pulsating in and out of existence. The reality has multiple dimensions, multiple levels to it. The physical level is pulsating in and out of existence, but also the spiritual level, the consciousness level, also is pulsating in and out of existence. It goes through cycles. It goes through cycles of information, cycles of growth, cycles of knowledge, and it goes through, so to say, birth-death cycles. Now, it's not a death in terms of a removal, but it's a death in terms of goes to the back. So there's a moment in, so to say, let's say right now we're going to study something. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to study, but we're going to study something, and based on our past, it's going to be something special and unique. And so we didn't know this before we were going to study it. And yet this is the moment that Hashem chose to reveal this wisdom to us. And as we study it, we sort of merge with it, we're into it. And then that information, so to say, goes to the back of our mind, and now we're ready for a new pulse, a new thing. So the pulsation works on multiple different levels, each level being very, very significant. Okay, so the idea of Mashiach, of course, is not just a singular thing. First of all, there is the revelation of Hashem. There's the idea of the new Torah, the infinity of Torah, the fact that you can always learn more. I recently blogged an interesting thing, and this certainly occurred to me, and I think it's occurred to much of the world, and that is that we used to have kind of, if you want to call it, square minds. In other words, the way our minds functioned, or the way we assumed reality is that reality has truth, and people were looking for the truth. And if you found the truth, perhaps you may have gone a little deeper into the truth. But there was basically a square. Wherever you looked, there was a square. Science had a truth, and let's say religion had a truth. But basically the notion was there's truth and there's lack of truth. But really what we've come to understand is actually truth is infinite. It's a very profound concept. In other words, there is no box. There's just circles. And we're circling within infinity. And that's the real truth. But to get ourselves to that state is not simple, because we come from a box mentality. We were born into reality in which, there's 6 dimensions, we have 5 senses, and we assume that information is similar to sensation. But information is not like sensation. Sensation is in a box, and there are dimensions, but that's only the dimension that we're in. But infinity has no dimensions. Infinity is revelation. Revelation is infinite. And so then we have to sort of transform ourselves out of being box people into being sort of, it says, when Mashiach comes, tzaddikim, which all Jews are called tzaddikim, will all become prophets, will grow wings, and they will kind of hover over the ocean, which is very similar to the description of the world in its very beginning of creation, is that the world was covered with water, and the spirit of Hashem kind of pulsated within the universe. And so what that really means is that we will learn a new way of living, right? It says that light will not be, you won't go by the light of the sun, but by the spirit of Hashem, which is very similar to this concept that first comes the spirit of Hashem, then comes the sun. In other words, you'll be in a kind of almost an intuitive direction with Hashem himself. And this is one of the aspects of Mashiach. There are many, many aspects. I don't want to go too deeply into Mashiach. But one of the interesting things is, of course, there'll be the resurrection of the dead. And in the resurrection of the dead, the tzaddikim, who in fact the Rebbe brings down that the tzaddikim are actually created for the time of Mashiach. Right now, we have very, very little inkling into who they really are and to their greatness. But we do know that they're very special. In fact, it's very interesting that the tzaddikim are not only our tzaddikim, the whole world, ironically, the Muslim world as well, revere our prophets as their prophets, as being very, very great and holy people. And so therefore, when they come back with the coming of Mashiach, it will be very clear to the whole universe, as the prophecy says, that they'll say, Shekin Chilulahem Aveseyim, our ancestors gave us a lie, but they've already been primed to believe and to see the truth, and they'll be easily kind of swayed into the truth. So the tzaddikim themselves all will obviously have a place, like the Rebbe says, Mashiach, and anybody that knows the Rebbe knows that this is kind of very much his style. Mashiach will not absolve anyone of their duties. In fact, he will give us our mission. And therefore, all the tzaddikim, Moshe Rabbeinu teaching Torah, Aaron lighting the menorah, whatever it is, everybody's going to have their role, David HaMelech being David HaMelech, the Rebbe being the Rebbe. Everybody's going to continue along their path. In fact, as we discussed, Mashiach is and it's a very beautiful concept. Mashiach is not another reality, it's our reality redeemed. In other words, it's where we have clarity in every aspect of our reality, and we truly understand what reality is all about. And so that is the idea that we all have a very special role to play. Everything has a role to play, and we come out of darkness, which is confusion, and we get into light, which is clarity. Okay, so that's just a little introduction. Vayidaber Lekim is called Mamer. Hashem spoke all these words, saying, it's known. We've mentioned this a couple of times. This thing that it says Lamer, the Me'acha Shekol Yisrael, because every single Jew, the souls of every generation, they were all there at Mount Sinai. And they heard these words from Hashem. So if that's the case, why does it say Leim Lachem? God said these words to transmit to others. We were all there. The basic explanation is that the pasuk is actually explaining to us what is novel, what is unique about Matan Torah. It would seem that even before Matan Torah, the Jewish people learned the whole Torah. This is obvious in the fact that Avraham Avinu did the whole Torah before it was already given. So if he did it, he had to know it. In order to do the Torah, you have to learn it. And definitely Avraham Avinu taught the whole Torah to Yitzchak, his son. And Yitzchak taught it to Yaakov and his sons. As we know, it says there was never a time that there wasn't a yeshiva. Even the tribe of Levi being priests, and the priests were not obligated to work in ancient Egypt, and so they sat and studied Torah. So if that's the case, it's actually a very fascinating question of the Alter Rebbe, which is, what exactly is so novel about Matan Torah? My father told me, very interesting, that the Rebbe Rashab says that there were obviously Torah scholars at the site of Matan Torah. So what are Torah scholars interested in? Something novel. Somehow Hashem comes up with 10 very simple statements. So what's going on? What exactly is so novel about Matan Torah, considering that they already had or some of the people had the knowledge. So the answer is, and we sort of learned this in a different Mamer, that what happened is that God gave us a power in all generations. Here we are in 2020, that our study of Torah should be a repetition of Hashem. In other words, we're not just studying information, we are imbibing and sort of getting onto a divine frequency. There are two explanations on this. Number one, when you study Torah, you cause that Hashem should actually say these words. Like I said yesterday, that it says that when we study Torah, the lips of a tzaddik, so we're studying these words from the Rebbe, so his lips are moving with these words. In other words, we cause Hashem. So this is very interesting, sort of like what we had in the previous moment, that there's a cause and effect, right? We always think that the cause and effect goes from God to man, but actually it's in the reverse as well. It goes from man to God. When you study Torah, Hashem is sitting opposite you, and He is learning the words, He is repeating the words that you say. So very fascinating explanation. Never saw this before. What does it mean that you say all these words? Saying is that when you say these words, you cause that Hashem should say the words. Furthermore, that when you learn Torah, it's done in a way of lamar, that we are repeating the words that Hashem is saying. Like it says, tongue will repeat your words. The words of the Torah that a person says, they are the words of Hashem. My words repeat the words of Hashem. Okay, this is another explanation, which is very, very beautiful, very deep. This is based on something the Zohar says, and that yesterday we spoke a little bit about this, that there are 10 sayings that Hashem made the world with, or makes the world with, because Hashem continues to say these things, as the Baal Shem Tov says, as we discussed in the 12 chapters of Shara Yichud Amuno, the second book of Tanya, that these sayings are like the energy systems and the energy codes that create all the different facets. Interestingly enough, I was reading in a book, this interesting guy, I'm not sure if everything he says is correct, but I got an indication from him about the connection between like atoms and the Hebrew words. And so I checked it out. I just randomly chose the word mayim. And it's really quite fascinating, because if you look at the atomic structure of H2O, so it's 2 oxygen molecules around 1 hydrogen. And really the 2 oxygen, just like mayim, it's mem, yud, mem. They surround the other ones. So it stands to reason that there's actually a direct connection between the very Hebrew letters, and if you want to call it the letters of the electrons and, and the structures of them. And so these words perhaps are the formation of those electrons or those atoms, and therefore, obviously, if those things exist, they have to continuously exist. So, but the 10 commandments are connected to these 10 sayings, and therefore, as what it says in the Zohar, when the Jewish people study Torah, we give energy to the 10 sayings. So again, there's a direct correlation. It's very difficult to understand because we are born into a world that existed before us. But actually, the existence of the world is caused by us. So when we study the Torah, we basically are saying the source code of reality, and whether we realize it or not. And that causes that reality should have a firm and positive existence. Similarly, when we learn Torah, So when we learn Torah, we draw down this divine energy below. Okay, so we've just explained three things. Number one, I say Torah, Hashem says Torah. Number two, the Torah that I say is a repetition of the Torah that Hashem is saying. Number three, when I study Torah, I draw down divine energy into the 10 sayings that create reality. And if that's the case, any time that there is an explanation on a verse, if you have a couple of explanations, they're interconnected. So the question that the Rebbe has is, what is the interconnection between these three explanations? The Mamer of the Rebbe Marash with this heading, which was said 100 years ago, after we emphasize that the word lamer is extra, maybe Mashakasa B'Yalkut. The Rebbe Marash brings what it says in the Yalkut. Kishahaya Kosh Baruch Hu Medaber, Haya Kol Echad MiYisrael Imer Imei Adiber Medaber. This is something very beautiful that I love very much. And that is that we sort of have this notion in our mind that Hashem spoke, it was like a loudspeaker, and everybody heard what Hashem said, but that's not what happened. When Hashem spoke, the speech subdivided itself individually to the extent that everybody said, Hashem is talking to me. Shenemar, like it says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am God your Lord, Lashon Yachid, in a personal way. Right, so like one of the things that's, actually the Rebbe brings it down. And it explains, this is what it says in the Medrash al Pasuk in the verse, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am the God your Lord. Shakol Sheshamu B'Aseret HaDibros, the voice that they heard during the 10 Commandments. This was according to the kind of comprehension of each individual. And this is a very profound concept. I'll discuss in a second. The young people according to their power and their abilities. The older people according to them. And the younger people according to them. You see, anybody that has a bit of seichel, when you talk to somebody, it depends who you're talking to. Right? If you're talking, let's say you're a doctor, you're talking to a doctor, you could use terminology that a layperson doesn't understand. But if you're talking to a person, I don't know, someone that's intelligent but doesn't have medical background, you have to change your language. If you're talking to a child, you have to change your language as well. So there's a very big mistake that we make is we think that Hashem kind of is monolithic. Meaning Hashem says 10 commandments, he's coming with this power structure, I am the God, that's it, whoever gets it, lucky you. But it's not actually the story. Hashem, of course, is both infinitely powerful, but he's also infinitely humble. And so just like a parent that has 10 children, obviously he may have the power, but he also has the humility. He's there for the children, he wants the children to succeed. So he knows all of his children, and he speaks to each child according to the mannerism that the child needs. And so, therefore, Hashem did the same thing. He came to each individual, and he comes to each individual like we need. Now, this is very interesting, because this means perhaps Hashem actually comes to us in the way, this is not what the Mamer says, but I'm bringing this from somewhere else. Hashem actually comes to us in the way we come to him. Right? There's something called Yechidus. Yechidus is a very, very profound exercise. It's when, really, it's one of the great innovations of the Hasidic movement, that you had these great Rebbes who stood, in a certain sense, they say tzaddikim mirror God or mirror their creator. They towered above us in great intelligence and saintliness. And therefore, it was obvious that people wanted their blessings, their intelligence, their wisdom, etc., etc. And they would give of their time freely. Literally, the Rebbe, had 3 nights a week. Anybody could come. Sometimes it would take a long time to get an appointment. But the bottom line is they made themselves available. It wasn't only the Chabad Rebbes. All the Rebbes had this custom. And it was really a tremendous sacrifice. I mean, the Getter Rebbes had 1 million Chassidim, and you could imagine how many people wanted to see him. And so it's not a simple story. But one of the things that this affected is something called yichidus. Yichidus means that the Rebbe sort of exists at the core of his soul. Our souls, as we know, have basically two parts: the part in heaven, the core part, but it also has the manifestation on earth, which is sort of called the feet part. That's why we have two names. We have Yaakov and Yisrael, as opposed to Avram that became Avraham, and his name never is Avram again. Yisrael, even though his name was Yisrael, he still maintains the name Yaakov, because Yaakov is Yud Akev. Yud is Hashem's name in the Akev, in the heel. And Yisrael is Li Rosh, my head. So you can see that here we're speaking about two different levels of the soul, and we have both levels. So in other words, the Rebbe being in the kind of his essential soul, when you come to the Rebbe, he can see your essence, he can reveal your essence, he can help you on an essential level, which is really how he connected. As Alan Dershowitz said, everybody he met that was great, they had something behind them, maybe the power of politics or the power of money or the power of the media, but the Rebbe didn't have any power. He only had the power of the soul. It was a soul-to-soul connection. And so therefore, but it says an interesting thing. As you walk into Yechidus is as you come out. In other words, if you're coming into the Rebbe like an individual, which is basically, I remember seeing this guy, he became Chabad, and a special guy, and the Rebbe kind of got him into activism, so he wants to ask for a blessing for a business, and the business failed. And he later came to the Rebbe, he sort of with a complaint, I did the business based on your blessing. The Rebbe says, you didn't ask me advice if you should do the business, you asked for a blessing, I gave you a blessing. So in other words, there's the way we approach Hashem. Are we coming to Hashem with demands? I know what to do. Or are we coming to Hashem with humility? I don't know what to do. Give me some advice. And so it says in Kabbalah, a very fascinating concept. Noida b'sha'orim baila. In other words, Hashem, it's a very deep concept. Hashem may actually be reacting to us. Oh, you're coming to me as a Steve, you've said this before. You're coming to me as a, celestial butler. Okay, fine. I'll see what I can do for you. You're coming to me as a rabbi or as a Rebbe for advice. I'm happy to give you my advice. I'm happy to tell you what to do. So figuring out our relationship with God is something that it speaks about in Toward a Meaningful Life. Many of us know God, but many of us don't have a mature relationship with God. Understanding the God that you know, understanding the dynamic of how this dynamic works is not a simple matter. And just briefly saying, I would say that basically it works in kind of like a parent-child, Rebbe Chassid relationship. On one hand, Hashem is a parent, and he needs to provide for us, and he wants to provide for us. But there's also the concept of a Rebbe Chassid relationship, which is that Rebbe is not going to tell you what to do. He's not coming with any power. He's only there as an advisor. So he's giving you free choice. You want his advice, he's happy to give you advice. And obviously, being a Rebbe, coming from a higher perspective, his advice will be effective. His advice will work. So this is an interesting concept. Anyway, so this is just a side note on this concept that Hashem actually comes to us individually, and it matters also how we come to him. From the reasons that we also bring the Mamer, the Medrash, who the fish, days and movement, it's very, very interesting what the Rebbe says here. I don't understand it, but basically he's saying that the way that Hashem approaches us individually is not only spiritually. You're at this level, I'll explain it to you at this level. You're at that level, but also physically. He spoke to each person according to kind of the physical capacity that they had, which in a way is a very beautiful concept, that Hashem knows our frailties, he knows our weaknesses, and he's willing to deal with us in our frailties, in our weaknesses. I just want to find this line that I sort of blogged today, and that is that One second, I'm sorry. Let's see. Very interesting. To begin with judgment or with acceptance is how we will end. Think, for all is in this. In other words, when we begin a relationship with judgment, in a certain sense, we're going to end that way. But if we begin it with acceptance, we'll also end that way. So Hashem doesn't begin his relationship with us with judgment. He begins his relationship with us with acceptance. And that's a very beautiful concept, that we are not being judged, we are being loved. Now, obviously, there's a point, I believe, in which kind of acceptance may shift, say, okay, well, this is going way too far. But basically, the primary concept here is Hashem is seeking, like a parent to a child. You know, you didn't have a child to judge your child. You had a child to love your child. And so you're here to try to help the child in whatever capacity you have. Okay, anyway. So the Mamer explains the reason why this 10 Commandments was in a way that Hashem subdivided it out. He made it personalized. Even though in general, Torah does have a kind of monolithic thing. It says this is the law, this is what you got to do, and it applies to everybody equally. Generally, it says in the whole Torah, I am God your Lord. So in other words, why in Matan Torah do we suddenly get this uniqueness in which we are getting a kind of concept where Hashem is suddenly becoming a personal God? Now, it's an interesting concept because, of course, as we mentioned before in the previous Mamer, that Matan Torah is not a simple story. It's the container, it's the klal, it's the general principle in which all details are found. Not only the details that are found, but even the details which aren't found, the secrets of the Torah. So part of the secret of the Torah is that Hashem is a personal God. And so therefore it makes sense that in Matan Torah should be revealed the fact that Hashem is not only kind of a king, he is also a rabbi, which means teacher. That's one of the things that speaks about Mashiach. Mashiach will have these two qualities, the quality of a king, but also the quality of a rabbi teacher. Al Pima, the Isa, the Yalkut Sham. So it says in the Yalkut, the Vishas Matan Torah, Shitef HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shmei B'Kol HaChavechem Yisrael. Okay, I never knew this. This is very, very interesting. You know, the names of the angels have names of Hashem. For example, you have Michael, Gabriel, Raphael. So you see that the name Kel is in all of the angels. Now, my name happens to be Michael, but I say we have a Yochanan with us. So Yochanan is not a name of God. Yochanan means from like Chanan, from like compassion. Chanani Yalikim, Hashem was compassionate to me. So when we became the Jewish people at Matan Torah, Hashem put his name in each and every one of us, which is a very profound concept. Angels in general actually have two names. They have the name when they're serving God, which then, because they're a vehicle of God, God's name is in them. And that's why they can actually speak in God's name. And then they have the name as they are kind of just their own being. And so, I don't know, I mean, this is something I'm bringing out, correlating. It doesn't mention it here, but anyway, so that's just an interesting concept. Sinai b'kodesh, Shitov Kodesh Baruch Hu, Eshmoi b'kol achavechem Yisrael, Anoichi Hashem lekecha. So God put his name in every single Jew. When he gave us the Torah. Mamer continues in the Mamer. Through this, that the name of God is connected in the angels. What this causes is that they are humble to his name. It's very interesting. It speaks about the Malachim. They have great love. But in a certain sense, the love doesn't come from them. The love is sort of an instinct implanted within them. Similarly with Jews, the fact that God gave us his name creates in every Jew a certain humility towards Hashem, as the Mamer explains at length. The name of God that he placed in us is greater than the name that he placed in the angels. The Malachim siv Adonai Ba, in the angels it says Adonai Ba. Like it says Tanya, the angels are called Elikim. The Elikim Adonai B'chos and Yecha. Generally speaking, Elikim and Adonai are one thing. But by the Jewish people it says Ki Chelek Havaya Amen. Now remember, every name of Hashem refers to a different sphere, a different level. And by the Jewish people it doesn't say we are Adonai. It says Havaya, the holy name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Chelek Mashem Havaya. We're part of that name, which is part of the essence. Even though this fact existed before Matan Torah, but it was not revealed. There's the idea that God is part of us. This is based on our soul. Now, when the soul descends into this world, it conceals the soul and the name of God, which is in it. And during the giving of the Torah, through the speech, I am God, your Lord, this came in a revealed way. This is explained in the Likutei Torah. What does it mean, I am God, your Lord? This means that God should so be revealed within you that he is called by your name, Elokecha, your God. Right? In a certain sense, that's what it means to be a light unto the nations. So when the nations see a Jew, they see basically godliness. And what is the power that God should be your God? Now, where is this power that even after we come into physical bodies, we can have, so to say, the name of God upon us? In fact, it's interesting, our body itself corresponds to the name of God, because your head is like a Yud, your body is like a Vav, and you have 5 fingers, which is Hey, and 5 toes, which is Hey, which is the name of Hashem. The Shem of Vayim is Hadasme Gilu Shaloi Hu L'mayla Davka. So the real revelation of the name of God is in heaven. In order for it to come down here, it takes the infinity of Hashem that can combine any types of even opposite realities, take heaven, bring it to earth. Whatever is higher actually has more capacity to go lower, right? The more somebody knows, the easier it is for him to teach someone who knows less. Now, because the name of Hashem that he combined in the Jewish people is the name of Havaya, that's higher than the name Adonai, which is connected to the angels. Not just sure, it's a especially that the source of this ability to put the name together comes from the Eibishter himself, from God himself, which is even higher than the name of Havaya. It comes from the source of infinity that has no limitation, so it can put opposites together. In fact, it says the very ability to put a soul in a body, which are 2 completely separate different things, because the body is physical matter and the soul spiritual, is only from the power of Hashem. Therefore, the humility of the Jewish people that happens through the name of Hashem, that is connected to Him, this is a very great humility, greater than the humility of the angels. The idea of the name of Hashem, which is in every single person. The Mamer explains, the Yud of God's name is the wisdom of the soul. This is the understanding of the soul. The whole idea of Bina is to be able to take a concept and subdivide it into its particulars. And obviously we're speaking about the spiritual level of this on like godly concepts. So, without going into all the technicalities of this, but basically it's a famous meditation, which is the knowledge that there are actually two energies. Soviv Kolam, Malakalam. Soviv Kolam is the energy that is infinite, and therefore we really have no understanding of infinity. And the Malakalam is the energy that sort of comes out of infinity, and it creates everything in particular, which is quite interesting because when this quantum physics professor was here, this is what he said, is that it's really quite amazing that every single particle, every single nano or whatever, every electron, everything that exists, that's coming into existence all the time, the state that it comes from is the state of infinity. And even though it has a measurable quantity, its quantity is only measurable after it goes through 4 concealments, which is very interesting because we have 4 universes above us spiritually, which basically is the same concept. And these 4 concealments allow the thing to come into a finite state. So really it's an extraordinary miracle that anything exists, because if you begin from an infinite state, to get from an infinite state to a finite state is a miracle itself. And it only is in the capacity of the infinite, right? A finite thing can never become infinite. But an infinite thing, a truly infinite thing, a conscious infinite thing can become finite. So that means that the whole universe is like nothing, because it's just a choice of the infinite to create something finite. So the Vav of Hashem is the emotions of the soul. The and the Hey is Hayira Tata, the Kabbalah soul. So it's a very succinct little idea, which is that you have your understanding of divinity, which we mentioned is the meditation. Then if you have an understanding of divinity, you have an emotion towards divinity. We have an emotion towards that which is greater than us and sublime. And then you have your humility to divinity, the final Hey, which is Malchus, which is you have a sense of Kabbalah soul. If God is so great, we obviously accept his accept him, his wisdom. It continues in the Mamer. So the 4, okay, so Rebbe brings down what I said before, that the 4 letters of God's name actually is our body. Our head is like the Yud, and the body is like a Vav. And the 5 fingers of the hand and the 5 fingers of the feet, they are the 2 Hays. The Mamer continues. The Yesh Laimar, that we can say that Tam Sheshnam Eser Tzbois B'Yadayim, that the reason we have 10 fingers on the hand, Eser Tzbois B'Raglayim Hu, and 10 fingers on our feet, Ki B'Shem Havaya B'Milyo Ahein, we know every Hebrew, like ABC, doesn't have a word. But in Hebrew, every letter has a word. For example, we don't call it we call it aleph. Aleph is made up of 3 letters, aleph, lamed, pei. So in Hebrew, it's called the milui, the full word. The full word is hey. Hey is 2 hays. 2 hays is 5 and 5. So you have 5 fingers on your right and 5 fingers on your left. 5 toes on your right and 5 toes on the left. Who can negate? Hey. So now we understand that you have God completely in your body. If I wanted to take it a little further, the Rebbe doesn't say this, but it's maybe just imagination, but actually the Yud represents your head, and then you have the Dalid, which is like your torso, and also the head, and then you have the Vav, which is your entire body, and the Vav, your head has that little part on top. And then similarly, on the final thing, you have Vav, which is a long line, Yud, Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. Anyway, I'm not sure if that works, but similar concept. With Dugmas, it's very interesting. There's a Russian Jewish scientist, a religious man in Israel, so he's very great in DNA research. So it turns out, of course, as you know, that DNA has, it's a double helix, and it has bridges between the two. And it turns out, he like sort of asked his computer for the answer, the bridges go in this sequence of 10, 5, 6, and 5. So literally, you have Hashem's name even within the sequence of DNA. Anyway, so that was his revelation. So this is similar to a person who's speaking. He has an intention. So sometimes when you speak, you may say something, but the person doesn't know what you are saying. And okay. So when we speak about the miloi, the complete letter, or when you say this word in a complete way, what happens is you have a revelation of that which is concealed, because hey is the common, but the other letters, for example, the word aleph, without going into too much detail, aleph, if you turn it around, makes the word pella, which means wonder, which is connected to Hashem, which is Alufay Shel Olam, the master of the universe. And Hashem is Aleph Chachma, he teaches wisdom in a wondrous way. So it all interconnects. So there are hidden meanings, and the hidden meanings are, of course, the deeper. So the fact that Hashem is within us, not only in a revealed way, but a concealed way, relating to the hidden part of Hashem, means that the hidden part of Hashem is also in us. Very, very profound. Right? One of the great concepts is that when Mashiach comes, we'll realize that our bodies are greater than our souls. Why? Because our bodies contain the essence of Hashem, because only the essence of Hashem, like we said before, matter has to come from infinity. So in fact, when you're looking at matter, you're looking at pure godliness, because that's the only ability for matter to exist. So your body, in a certain sense, has a greatness over your soul. Your soul is maybe intelligence. Your body's raw divinity. And so that's a sign that the body conceals the essence. In order for us to understand this, we need the deeper wisdom, the wisdom of Kabbalah and Chassidus, which is revealed in a secret way originally at Matan Torah. Who the difference between these two things are. That the difference in the revelation of the name of God, of the soul, even when it comes down into a body, this is only relative to the space, the physical space from which the revelation comes about. Right, so you have the concept that Hashem comes into the body in a physical space, and then you have the concept that where is this ability coming from the essence of Hashem himself, because it's only that which is truly infinite that can limit itself. And what's unique about the kind of shape of the body that has the shape of Hashem's name, this is in the name of Hashem himself. Because the fact of Hashem's name, which transcends reality, and a physical body which is limited, are two opposites. In order for God's name to have an image in the physical body, this does not come about from something which is higher. Because how do you have something that comes about into something lower? It means that something, let's say if I'm, one second, let me just get clarity on what the Rebbe is trying to say here. Very fascinating concept. He says like this. Basically, it's an analogy. I think what I'm saying is correct. But if I'm transferring information to you, okay, it's two spiritual entities, but the information has not become physical. But if God is placing himself in a physical body, if he's placing himself in a dimension, meaning in a shape, so like a limitation, in a way that's a transference and an infinite transference from an infinite to a finite state. So that's in a tremendous, tremendous gap. And that gap can only come, as we said before, from a place of infinity, which because it's infinite has no limitation, even the limitation of being infinite. So Hashem gave us the power that when we read the Torah, that Hashem should be doing it right. So all these questions we have, and again, this relates to something that I've mentioned before, a very fundamental misconception about God, which basically only in Judaism, not only in Judaism, basically only in Jewish mysticism, gets it right because it's so counterintuitive. And that is that we don't understand that something which is infinitely beyond us can also be infinitely with us. Why? Because we say if something is infinite and it's greater than us, why should it be with us? Not only why should it be with us, how can it be with us? It must be sublime. It must be beyond our reality. So that's why you have monks and people trying to separate themselves from reality. But the reverse is the case. You know, I had an uncle, I mentioned it before, but he asked the Rebbe, very famous, like in a way, the one who began to truly reveal the concept of infinity. Because even Kabbalah, in a way, God is very great, but you don't necessarily see the true concept of infinity because you see a greatness, you see levels beyond us. But the Baal Shem Tov begins to reveal, no, how Hashem is within the world. He says every drop of every leaf turning is a design from a plan. It's like very counterintuitive. He speaks about a worm at the bottom of the ocean as part of God's plan. So my uncle asked the Rebbe, he says he doesn't understand why, why should this be a worm at the bottom of the ocean? So the Rebbe said a fascinating thing. He says, I don't understand how it can be in the other way. The Rebbe, one of the great things of the Rebbe was the knowledge of the infinity of Hashem. In fact, it speaks about the Lubavitcher Rebbe is actually coming directly. So perhaps coming directly from that level, their soul didn't really get too limited, so they're able to understand things that our souls kind of coming through different universes that limit our souls and our comprehension have very difficult time understanding. Like we said before, our basic conception of reality is within the finite. As one guy told me, a very great scholar, he says, what is our mind? Our mind is only what we understand, right? But there can be entire realms of reality which are beyond our capacity to understand. Anyway, separate issue. The bottom line is like this. So the Rebbe told my uncle he doesn't understand the reverse. He doesn't understand how Hashem wouldn't be concerned about the worm at the bottom of the ocean. Why? Because let's say you have a company. You want to know what's going on in your company. Let's say you have 1,000 branches. You can't know. So you hire managers until you get a general idea. But if you could know what was going on, would you not know? Of course you would know. That's the concept. Hashem, of course, he can know what's going on with every sub-detail. So he does. In fact, it says in the Zohar that there was a time that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, he came and he saw there was a trap. It was like a net. I guess it was the way they used to trap birds, hang up these big nets. The birds would fly, and some of them would get stuck in the net. And before every single thing, every bird would get stuck, he would hear a voice, chayiv, like kind of. So he understood there was a direct correlation between the world above us and the world that we are in. But, yeah, so that's a very important concept to understand, right? That Hashem, it's directly correlated. My life and God's life are intimately connected. And therefore, it's not only that he's beyond me, it's that he's with me. And that he wants, ultimately we live forever on earth. So what are we going to do? We're going to learn to use earth in the right way. We're going to learn to use ourselves in the right way. We're going to learn how to function properly. We're going to grow. So that's a very profound concept. So the parish Vayidaber Mamer who should be matan nitna koyach lekolach v'acham Yisrael k'shiyika v'teri yikos baruch kodev b'shein connected. So Hashem, of course, like we said yesterday, it's not a normal thing. It's counterintuitive and it doesn't really make sense. But Hashem doesn't have to make sense. So therefore, he created things that he wants to create. And he created something that whenever we study Torah, here we are, we're studying some Torah, Hashem is repeating the words we're saying. Similarly by mitzvahs. So we all put on tefillin today. When we put on tefillin, you cause that Hashem puts on tefillin. And this power that a Jew has, and when you learn Torah, Hashem will learn Torah and opposite you. And when you do a mitzvah, Hashem does the mitzvah that you do. So we cause effects. So this is because Hashem spoke to us in a singular. In other words, a very deep concept. I never really saw this before, but if I understand it, what really happened at Matan Torah was Hashem basically married us. He connected to us. And therefore, in a marriage, we imitate each other. And Hashem, therefore, began to imitate us. That the ideas that are explained in the Mamer as a preparation to the explanation that our study of Torah is that the learning of Torah is that a person causes that Hashem should learn opposite him. Our humility that Hashem put his name in us. It's very interesting because this reminds me of what it says in Tanya, that Hashem is only connected to those things that are humble to him, even in potential. And every Jew potentially, as their souls come from Hashem, and as we've seen throughout Jewish history, that even Jews who are not that religious, but when it comes to standing up for the fact that the Jews are willing to give their life. And so the Jew has this infinite connection, sometimes a connection that he himself is unaware of because it hasn't needed to be expressed. As we said before, the lower the descent, the higher the revelation. Because only that which is highest can come into the lowest. Same thing with Shar Perushim B'Leimer. The Perush B'Leimer Shalom the Torah Hu Ba'if the Tan L'Sheni Mesechka Ina Acher HaKeira. Who had Gosh in Bittul. So this is the idea of Bittul. This is the idea of humility. So this is the idea of the Ten Commandments come all the way down here. And these are the two things that come in the Mamer as an explanation. That the Lamer is that through the study of Torah of a man, he causes that Hashem calls and reacts to him because all connections in Lamer are interconnected. So the explanation is as follows. The Matan Torah Gimel Inyanim. In Matan Torah there are three things. Because Baruch Hu Nesan Torah, God gives the Torah. Yisrael Mekabel Torah, and Yisrael accept the Torah. Torah Atma, and the Torah itself. Now, what is unique in the Torah that was given at Matan Torah relative to the Torah that our forefathers studied before is both in the fact of the giving of the Torah, and it is also in relation to those that receive the Torah, and also of the Torah itself. So something unique happened in the giver, the receiver, and in the gift. What was unique in regarding the one that gave the Torah, like it says in Gemara, that the opening of Matan Torah, is the premise. When Hashem says Anoichi, this means I have put my soul, I've written my soul in this book and I am giving it to you. When it speaks about I myself, we're talking about the essence of Hashem. So God placed his soul, even though it doesn't make any sense. But again, things don't have to make sense. Hashem placed his soul inside the Torah. As the Medrash says, I sold you my Torah, it's as if I sold myself with it. So that's regarding God. Now, regarding the Jewish people that received the Torah, that when God gave us the Torah, he made us the owners of the Torah. Where does God give the power of Torah? Now, obviously, it has to go in the correct way, a mechanism, for example, the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court had tremendous Torah power. They created laws, for example, chicken, according to the Torah, is not unpermissible. However, unpermissible with milk. However, the rabbi said that this is an issue. And not only does it become a kind of a physical, prevention, no, it becomes a spiritual dynamic. And those that kind of can see spiritually see that these things make spiritual differences. So Shakoyach Lifsek Halach is the power of Torah, and so it goes so far that it could actually make changes in reality. This comes through the Jewish people. Obviously, in the right context, the rabbis that have the ability. So even though that there is Torah above, in fact, the Rebbe was very into this, that rabbis should make a decree, halach decree, Mashiach should come, because that Torah has a certain power. But be that as it may, there's Torah above. They study Torah in heaven. Obviously, they got to do something. But that's not where the halachas decide. That's not where the law is decided. Sometimes if they have a question, they go down to the Beis Din. They go down to mainly the Supreme Court below, and they ask them the question. Even if there's a voice from heaven that says, there was a debate once, this ancient Israel, about something, whether it's Torah, pure or impure, and a voice came out. There was one rabbi that was arguing, who was an expert in the field, and the other rabbis were disagreeing with him. And a voice from heaven comes out, whatever, that my son, Rabbi Akiva, he's 100% correct. They say, sorry, God, it's not the way it works. The Torah is given down here, and we have the obligation, based on majority, to make the law, and the majority believes this way. And then I think it was somebody asked Eliyahu and Navi, Elijah the prophet, what did God do at that time? So he said, God said, Natschuni, bani natschuni, my sons beat me. In other words, Hashem gave the Torah down here. So we see that the Jewish people were kind of empowered through the Torah, and then we have something unique about the Torah itself, that the Torah is given the Matan Torah in such a way that it causes a difference in the world, that the world should be according to the Hayra, the way of Torah. This is a very interesting thing because it reminds me of the fact that it says, Kilas Chacham al Tanai, basically that Hashem gave, sort of like he says to Avram Avinu, that until now I had the power of blessings and curses. From now on, I give the power to you. So what does this mean? It means that Hashem actually gives, I mean, obviously people on a level of a Rebbe, etc., but he gives them the power. Hold on one second, I just need to plug in my computer. Don't want it to go off. So he gives them the power to actually make differences. I mean, there were actually very great miracles that occurred, and obviously not every blessing is answered. However, there were blessings that certainly were answered. And it's funny to me because by the Catholics, how do they decide if someone is a saint? They had 3 miracles. Gave a prayer, and the doctor couldn't, it wasn't technical, and it was a miracle. 3. Joke that Rebbe did miracles like that every hour. So, and the Rebbe wasn't the only one. So Hashem gives, in a way, his power to these individuals. That's why, in a way, it says that, you have to study. Let's talk about the great sages in the olden days. You have to kind of get close to their fire. So you study, you don't get cold, but don't get too close so you don't get burnt. So in a way that Hashem gave, by Hashem giving himself in the Torah, what he does, because he's infinite, he gives his power over within the Torah, or perhaps to these great saints. So if that's the case, they should make a decree that Mashiach should come, because they have the power to do so. So now regarding it's very interesting. So the things that it says in the Torah do not only create an option, like it says, do not murder. So that's not only an option, it's actually something that will happen. It's an instruction, and it's also a promise. In other words, the Torah is the ideal state of the world. And the Torah has the power of Hashem. So maybe we have to get there through free choice, but we're going to get there. It's an absolute that what the Torah has ideally is the destiny of humanity. Yeah, because the speech itself creates that the world should function in this way. And even though this novelty is only on the effect of Torah on the man and the world, not on the Torah itself. In other words, it's not changing the Torah, it's just the empowerment of the Torah. Given Shem Torah, the Shmei shall call Dover Meir al Toichnei, whom Lashon Eira, Harei Achidish Ba'ifin Deira, Satera Sheira, Satera Ich, Shadam Ba'ilam Tzich Niyes Hi Ba'ifin Shepol Elas Aleim, Negela Torah Atzma. So the whole idea that the Torah, the word Torah comes from the word Hira, which means instruction. So the fact that the Torah has this type of new ability is connected to the essence of what the Torah is. It's difficult for us to understand this because we see the Torah very much as any book or information. Obviously, we say it's holy, it's coming from Hashem, but we don't really have a conceptual understanding of infinite information, of a single thing that can be infinite. And so therefore, because we don't have that understanding, it's very difficult for us to understand the power of Torah. Suffice it to say that when Hashem made the first light, This was a light that you could see anything from the beginning to the end of time, from one end of the world to the other. And he hid this light in the Torah. So the great tzaddikim, literally, they could open up a book of Torah and know things. It was like the Torah is a crystal ball. And most of us don't see that because we see an outer layer of the Torah. We see wisdom. But for those that had the capacity, they could even see science. They could see much in the Torah. One second. Interesting note that the Rebbe says here is that this is one of the differences of wisdom, secular wisdom, and Torah. Secular wisdom can enhance your life, but can never transform it. It doesn't have the power to make you into something greater than yourself. Whereas Torah, coming from Hashem, has the power to transform you into something much greater than what you began with. Similarly, the learning of the Torah of the Yid, as it says in the Torah, a bit of Avdallah being Tamil Latar, Ispardu, Kopale, Oven, Bedugmas, Pula, Ba'ilam, Shanasa, Yidea, Dibra, Shadibra, Kajabar, Matan Torah. So through the learning of a Torah that a Yid does, as it explains in the Torah there, that when the Yid learn that this is kosher, this is not kosher, they actually create a separation between the positive and the negative forces, and they separate out the demonic forces from the world. And once those forces are gone, so we have Mashiach, we only have positivity. Similar to what is achieved in the world, Hashem saying the Ten Commandments achieves the stability of the world. When we say the Torah, we achieve the stability because the very words themselves contain divinity. Now, this idea that we're creating a difference in the world actually is even more clear in the mitzvahs of the Torah. Through doing the mitzvah of the Torah after Matan Torah, we create a refinement in the physical thing in which we did the mitzvah. In many things, the physical thing becomes an actual part of the mitzvah, right? The tefillin that you wear is holy. You have to bury it. You can't throw it out, God forbid. So, in other words, when we do a mitzvah, we may not see it, but we draw in divinity into that object. This is what our sages say on the verse that Kol Hashirim She'omer Lefanecha Aves Reichos Hayu Aval Anu Shem Turek Shmecha Ka'adam Shemayrik Mikli Likli, that all the songs that our sages sang before you were like a scent, meaning it didn't have substance. But us, it's like pouring oil. You know, you can't compare, let's say, a physical substance to a scent. In other words, that all the mitzvahs that our forefathers did, they were only like a scent. However, us, our Torah, our mitzvahs, it's like pouring oil. It's got much more substance. In this saying, the three things that were novel, that became unique in Matan Torah, is explained. Number one, what's the difference between a scent and the oil is in the thing itself. Because a scent is only some of the kind of molecules that are kind of, spreading from that thing. So this shows on what is novel in the Torah mitzvah that we're given a Matan Torah. regarding the giver of the Torah and the commander of the mitzvahs. The Torah, K'meshim Mitzad Atzma, Achmas Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ki Ha'arab B'Vad Reach. Torah as it is on its own, which is the wisdom of Hashem, it's only a scent. But the true idea of Hashem and the Torah being one, in other words, that it's not just a scent, but it is Hashem. This happened in Matan Torah. Shos nimshach ba ha'atzmus shemen v'alderasu b'negei. Then the atzmus, the essence, came in, and similarly by mitzvah Matan Torah nimshach ba ha'atzmus, by the mitzvahs, the essence of a God comes into the physical, and therefore it creates a holiness. For example, in the tefillin, in the item that you use. There's another difference between the scent of the smell and the smell itself. That when you smell something, you don't lose anything from the actual substance. But if I take some oil, I pour oil from a jar into my cup, you obviously are removing some of the oil from its original location. Like a person that's pouring from one container to another. The idea is when you pour the Torah down here, when God gave us the Torah here, He took away the ability to make a halacha in heaven. The Torah is not in heaven anymore. And another idea is that the smell dissipates until there's nothing left of this smell. That's what happens with smell. Even though we get pleasure from scent, after you stop having the scent, you stop having pleasure. However, but the food, the shemen, the actual oil, even after you eat it, it remains in its kind of original existence. However, it has transformed into blood and flesh. So the substance, like Einstein said, matter never dies, it just transforms. It's just transformed into your cells. And through this, it causes that the temperament of the individual should be according to the temperament of the food. That's why it says you are what you eat. And it's very interesting that if you notice, all the kosher animals are all tame animals. In fact, the Shalach HaKadosh of Yehuda Levi Horowitz, he once saw a turkey that was kind of being aggressive, and he decided that that cannot be a kosher bird. And since that time, he has descendants, they don't eat turkey. Because aggression is not part of the traits that we want. The entire goal of life is to imbibe sensitivity and compassion. And so therefore, the foods that we eat, in fact, it's interesting. I mean, I can't say I know this for sure, but something maybe is correlated. It says that if you have to remove the blood, because the soul is in the blood. Hashem may not want us to imbibe the soul or the spirit of these types of foods. So whatever we're going to draw down through doing the mitzvahs, and certainly through learning Torah, in other words, whatever our forefathers did through the mitzvahs and certainly through the Torah did not create an internal or a fundamental change in the world. Right. So let's say if Yaakov put on tefillin, part of the sticks of the service of putting on tefillin, but those sticks didn't become holy like the tefillin. He didn't draw down divinity in him. However, through the learning of Torah after the giving of Torah, certainly through doing the mitzvahs, the world completely transforms in an internal way and in a eternal way. So these three things that were nischadesh, that became new in Torah, as mentioned, the main chiddush, what was mainly unique in Matan Torah, was the fact that Atzmos, Hashem himself, came into the Torah. Through this you have what is unique in the Torah and those that receive the Torah. The Torah mitzad asra, that's Torah on its own, because the Torah is infinitely beyond the world. Meaning, if you didn't have the power of infinity of the Torah would not create a change in the world, because the Torah is infinitely beyond the world. It has no connection. Similarly, the mitzvahs. So where does the power for the change come? Because when Hashem gave us the Torah, He placed Atzmos, infinity, in it, and therefore it has an infinite ability beyond what is there on the surface. Because infinity is in all places equally. Similarly, the idea that Hashem says that you can make a law and I will fulfill it, because this is the concept of Hashem. He can limit himself in any way, shape, or form that he wants. And Hashem even smiles and he says, my children have won. And like the Rebbe says, Hashem is waiting impatiently that we should beat him, we should bring Mashiach, we should, so to say, coerce somehow the situation to bring Mashiach. This power that a Jew has comes from the essence of Hashem. This is much higher than his ability that he limited himself to be called Kutsha B'Yuchel. Okay, these are different names, different levels. The revelation, the power of the soul, as it is in the Atzmos, but Neshama, of the essence of the soul, as it comes down, so much more so the soul and the body. This is through the Torah. Through the revelation of Torah, was in Anoichi, which means that Hashem put his soul into the Torah. He put himself in the Torah. So through this he makes that he is the God in every single person. And through your proper study of Torah, this doesn't only remain a conceptual reality, it actually becomes an actual reality. This idea that I am God your Lord is higher than the Torah. In other words, it's the essence which is higher than the Torah. Now we know when we go to the source, right? It says there are two reasons Hashem made the world, for the Jews and the Torah. I don't know which precedes which. Is Torah for the Jews or Jews for the Torah? But the fact that the Torah speaks to the Jewish people, it shows that Torah is for the Jewish people. So it means that the source of the Jewish people, the original thought that Hashem had, was not to provide the Torah, but rather for the Jewish people, and Torah is for them. The Torah as it is after the giving of the Torah. The idea that I placed my soul in the Torah, this itself was done for the Jewish people. This revelation that I am God your Lord comes through the eye of the Torah. Meaning the eye, Hashem, as he comes into the Torah. So basically, the Torah reveals to us this fact. And this is why when we study Torah, we create transformation. Similar to the transformation that happened when Hashem said the 10 commandments, Kinal Sivav, like we said before, that the whole world became stable. So this is very, very interesting what the Rebbe says here. When we study Torah, we draw in Hashem, right? We said that Hashem gave himself with the Torah. So what are we doing when we're studying Torah? We're doing a lot more than studying wisdom. We're drawing Hashem into the Torah and subsequently into the world. And these words of Hashem create a difference in the world. So in other words, we're accessing the source code. We can explain even more so the difference that occurs when we learn Torah and do mitzvahs, the Adam Lamshach Atzmos Ba'Torah mitzvahs. In the drawing down of the infinity of Hashem in the Torah mitzvahs. Through how do we achieve this ability? That the learning of the Torah of a person should draw down the essence of Hashem. This occurs when your learning is with complete humility. Similarly, when we're talking about mitzvahs. So how do we achieve true humility? Is when we understand this fact itself, that the Torah that I study and the mitzvah that I do draws down Hashem. So what could be more humbling than that? The limit of Torah became a mitzvah. Even the learning of Torah and the doing the mitzvahs before Matan Torah did not achieve what happens after Matan Torah. For example, Avraham Avinu says, I am but dust and ashes. Now, dust and ashes also is something. So he was very, very humble, but he was a something. We achieve a humility, obviously, if we can, we achieve humility of nothingness. We understand that Hashem himself is everything, and he is the one in our Torah and our mitzvahs. The level of humility that we achieve is a complete level. This is similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, who received the Torah, and obviously he had to be on this level to get it. To Ksiv Bey, which he said, "V'nachnu mo," what are we? In other words, he wasn't saying we're dust and ashes. He's saying we're nothing. And Ma is actually a very holy level. It's one of the names of Hashem, one of the 8 names of Hashem. And we can achieve this through our Torah mitzvahs today. Why? The feast of Matan Torah, because Hashem became our personal God. As we said before, Hashem imbued himself. So he gave us the power of infinity. Like we said before, the very beautiful concept that what's unique about Torah, what's unique about Hashem is the transformative ability. Not to enhance yourself, it's to transform yourself to a new being. Vayidaber, Mili, Alpha, Megamati Yama. In fact, in Yud K Vav K, when you spread it out, like we said, the Milui Alphin, not exactly sure the different ways of gematria, but basically it adds up to 45. And the humility that we achieve through the study of Torah, through drawing down Hashem, is the highest type of humility. A connection with Hashem himself. So if you recall, we began the Mamer with saying that there were 3 explanations on Lamer. There's the fact that, you just have to remember it, something that Lamer is that Hashem says the words, that we say after Hashem, and I think that we draw Hashem down in the Torah that we study. So now this is connected with the three unique things that were kind of innovated at Torah. We said there's a benefit to Hashem, benefit to the Torah, and benefit to us. The explanation that when you learn Torah, what happened is that you can do this in a totally humble way, but even the in a way that you're just saying the words of Hashem. This is the uniqueness that happened in the Torah to Hashem, so to say. This is the idea that the Torah that we get at Matan Torah, it draws down Hashem Himself. Now you have another explanation, the explanation of Lamer, that the person who's studying Torah says to Hashem, he's sort of saying to Hashem that Hashem will repeat His words. This is who mitzad chidush shenas matayra b'negei Yisrael. This is based on what happened to the Jewish people. Makabli Torah. They got a power, so to say, to affect God. That's chuni bani naschuni. And the explanation of Lamer in the 10 Commandments that we draw down Hashem, 10 Commandments draws into the 10 sayings. This is based on what's unique that happened to Matan Torah, that it can actually affect the individual. And we can connect this with what our sages say. There's no free person except the person who studies Torah. Why? Because the Torah empowers the person. So those who study Torah, I guess properly in the right way, there's no force that can be in control of them. On the contrary, He controls the whole world. It reminds me of a story. The previous Rebbe, when he was imprisoned, it's in a Russian jail, which was no joke, and they came to take his picture. And it was Shabbos, and he was davening. So he told them to go away because he's Shabbos now. Come back later. The Rebbe says it's an unbelievable thing. Here he is. He's a prisoner. Not just a prisoner. He's a prisoner in communist Russia. Hell on earth. And when the photographers come, he's like, no, come back. So this is because he has the power of Hashem. And therefore, in fact, it says whatever the Rebbe did was with their permission. Even with the Alter Rebbe, he asked Shmuel Munkus if he should go to prison or not. So they had this power, and this power gave them the power basically to control reality. So the ability to study Torah in this way, with this absolute abnegation, not only does it free a person from any obligation to the world, it actually gives him control over the entire world. As we see, Moshe Rabbeinu controlled the superpower of his time. Mordechai did the same. The Rebbe, in a very kind of subtle, loving way, also. So they were on such a level, their Torah study was at such a level, their dedication was such a level that they literally had divine power, which they used obviously in positive ways. Now, from the individual redemption, we come to the general redemption. Then we will have true freedom, Gula Mitzvah Shlema, with a complete redemption. Mamer to Mashiach immediately. Okay, so that is the conclusion of the Mamer. Those who would like to go do anything else are more than welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi, for excellent lesson. And it's interesting as we are trying to learn our place in the universe to speculate, although you're not speculating, but to inform us where we stand, higher than the angels, but nothing compared to the infinity of Hashem. It's kind of an interesting plurality of thought there.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you. A blessing for everybody to stay healthy.
Amen.
Enjoy good weather when we have it, and we will look forward to tomorrow's lesson.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very, very much.
Take care. Yeah, John, take care.
Stevie, one other thing. Are you there?
Yeah, he must have left, yeah.
Gil, I didn't get a chance to say hello. How are you?
Хорошо. Очень. How about you?
Слава Богу. Жизнь прекрасна, семья прекрасна, погода прекрасна.
Все прекрасно.
Да. Я счастлива.
Do you work very hard?
Work? No, there's no work right now. I sit home and pontificate. I don't have any work right now. I'm waiting to hear from if they